everyone, and thanks for joining us. This video will show you how to assemble your Z-axis for your YoraHome laser. Here are the components that you should have received. You have the Z-axis, 4 spacers, 4 long bolts, and of course your Allen wrench. Let's get started. I recommend starting by unplugging your machine from power and unplugging the wires to your motors. As we work this, we might move on the wire x-axis, and as those motors turn, they do generate electricity that would go straight back to your motherboard, so let's avoid that. Remove the tiny screw securing your timing belt on one side and set it somewhere so you won't lose it. Remove 2 bolts on one side and hold onto your laser so it doesn't roll too much. Go to the other side and remove the bottom bolt and loosen the top bolt about halfway. This will make it easier to slide your laser off on the other side. Then head back to the side where you removed both bolts and your laser should slide right off. Go ahead and put 1 bolt back in the top to keep your rail in place so it doesn't bend or break your plexiglass. Pro tip, I use a roll of tape to keep all of my hardware together during a project so I don't lose anything. Let's head back over to where we unpacked our materials. It's time to begin removing the bolts, spacers, and guide wheels from the acrylic sheet attached to your laser. I recommend setting your wheels and spacers aside to keep organized, but place the nut back on the bolt for safekeeping. Do this on all 4 bolts. Next, we're going to remove the acrylic sheet from your laser head. I have a 40-watt laser here, so no worries if yours looks a little bit different. Once that is unscrewed, set the acrylic sheet aside, but hold on to your bolts. That acrylic sheet will no longer be needed for your unit. Go ahead and grab your Z-axis and get familiar with it. The front face has 4 bolts surrounding 2 rectangle cutouts with 4 keyhole slots below it. The back face is the side that holds the mechanism that moves the Z-axis up and down. You're going to remove the 4 bolts from the front face. It is very important that you set these aside and keep track of them because they are a different length than any other bolt in this project. When you take the front face off, watch out for the 4 nuts that are located there. Yours might be snug, but mine were loose, so I removed them and set them aside for safekeeping. Go ahead and grab the small bolts that held your acrylic sheet to your laser. You need 4 in total, so I used 4 leftovers from when I built my unit so they all matched. Another pro tip, hold on to all your extra hardware. You'll never know when you need it. Here's a size comparison of the longer bolts that help the Z-axis together compared to the shorter bolts that you're going to use to attach the front face to your laser. When you put the front face on the laser and are lining it up, make sure those 2 rectangles are at the top. We're going to get the bottom flush with the bottom of your laser and attach those 4 bolts in those keyhole slots. Now it's time to attach the laser. Take a moment to get familiar with the assembly orientation. The dial on the Z-axis is the top, with the back face facing in, and you will also want your motor assembly on the top as well, with the motor facing out. These are the holes that your bolts will go through. Go ahead and move the Z-axis dial to gain access to the 4 holes your long bolts will go through. Remember the bolts we removed at the beginning? You're going to need the nut on those now. If you get confused which bolt is which, just put them side by side and ensure you are using the longer one. The sequence is as follows. Long bolt through the Z-axis panel, a long spacer, a wheel, then a short spacer. This runs through the acrylic panel holding your motor assembly, and then finish it off with a small nut. I tightened this slightly to give it a little bit of stability while I assembled the other 3, but not too tight so I couldn't get the bolt and other components through. It is very important that you do the long spacer on the Z-axis side. This will become crucial when you place the laser back on your cross rail. You repeat this 3 additional times: long bolt, long spacer, wheel, short spacer, and a nut. Once you get all 4 on, tighten them up with an Allen wrench. It's time to put it all together. You can see where the 2 rectangle slots on the front face attached to the laser will fit perfectly on the Z-axis mechanism. Remember those nuts that we removed when we first took the Z-axis apart? Time to put them back in. I used a little bit of Scotch tape to help hold the nuts in. It won't impact operations and will ensure they stay put for me to get the bolts in. Just place 4 small pieces on the bottom where each nut will sit and you are good to go. Place the nuts into the slots like you can see here. You can see how the tape helps hold it into place. After that, line up the rectangles and bolt holes and put the front face on. Put the 4 bolts in and you are all set. Take a moment to check if everything is working properly. Use the Z-axis dial to see it move up and down, and make sure your wheels spin freely. Let's move back to our frame. Remember, you have 2 loose top bolts in, so it will tilt from side to side. Move your timing belt out of the way, as we will put that back on later. Remove the top bolt completely, and your laser will slide on your top rail, but be careful so your laser doesn't fall off. You can see I didn't have enough clearance here, so I moved the Y-axis back slightly, then pulled the bolts back in. Go to the other side and secure the 2 bolts there. Now let's get the timing belt back on. I have a little technique to make it a bit easier. I use a smaller Allen wrench to receive the belt after it clears the first wheel. I feed it over the top of the synchronous wheel and then slip it back under the second wheel. I use the smaller Allen wrench to get a hold of the timing belt and then feed it through. Reattach the small bolt and T-nut for the timing belt and adjust the tension as needed. Check to make sure everything works smoothly, then reconnect your wires. And that's all there is to it. Now you can enjoy the benefits of adjusting your laser height to your materials instead of raising your materials to your laser. Use your handy dandy spacer to get the distance just right and then fire away.